I'm Catherine Mazzone here on behalf of Mojo Streaming, and I'm very pleased to welcome Chinedu Mogbo. He is
Yep.
the founder of Green Fingers, and he's joining us right now from Africa. Where are you exactly, Chinedu?
Nigeria, Lagos, Nigeria, West Africa. Yes.
And I hear some voices around you. Is there some excitement going on?
Not really. I actually also work in a school. You hear kids, a lot of kids around, moving around. So that's basically what's happening. And they've gone off, they've closed for the day. So I think it's the commuting back and forth with them and the noise. That's basically what's happening.
Yeah, I kind of cheated, and I already knew you worked with children quite extensively. And so that was my opportunity. That was my sly little transition, right? It was good.
Yes, that was a good one. That was a good one.
So, I mean, you again, you work with children both through the conservation efforts that you do, as well as the education system. Tell me, why kids?
Okay, first, I think I've always had that desire. I mean, even growing up, even when I was a student, I would want to even teach my fellow, I would want to be like with my fellow classmates and like teach them about stuff that I know, things that I've learned. And I mean, that really grew with me sort of. Then when I now have to look at the conservation aspect of it and seeing how I didn't even get that as a child growing up, I wish I did. I wish I had such an opportunity to connect with people, teachers who were who knew a lot about wildlife, who were willing to um, allow me to explore my own natural intelligence, basically. I mean, and I see a lot of kids now these days who also are in that same kind of like situation. I mean, why not? Why not open up that door and have these kids experience those things that would basically create future conservationists to actually make a difference in the lives of these children, which in turn will make a difference in our own lives, basically, or in the lives of wildlife, basically, in general, for the country or for our country in the future. So it's been all about teaching and imparting the next generation and ensuring that the next generation carry on the right values, the right attitude. Basically, that's why I've been here.
And obviously, it's important to you and it's important to conservationists, but it's not something that everybody thinks about as cognizantly. So is conservationism and activism, is that sort of thing important in your community? And if not, how do you impart that upon those who live and work around you?
Okay, it is. I'd say conservation isn't one of the major things or one of the most important things within our community, especially even in a country like Nigeria. Conservation it's actually one of the most difficult experiences I've basically ever had to face because I mean I'm battling against odds of people not caring. They don't want they don't care but basically about anything when it has to do with wildlife but we now have a population now, a growing population that are seeing the things that are important and know these things that are important and are willing to ensure that everybody that something is done about it. And that's why there's kind of like a shift now. But it's not that many, but we are seeing the shift and with a lot of influence from the international community. Now, Nigeria now is no longer being that kind of isolated country where basically we don't feel anything basically is happening. Now there's a lot of influence from the United Nations, from the whole climate change conferences that are happening now. There's a lot of light now being shed on these important things. You hear about trafficking, wildlife trafficking. Nigeria is trying to do something now about it. So we cannot ignore the fact anymore but it still hasn't gotten down really to the grassroots level. And that's why we basically do what we do. And that's why we are really advocating and pushing to ensure that as much as we can, let's see how we can make that, or if I say not make, lead to that change, or that lead the efforts in trying to conserve as much as we can, and teach others who will come after to also have a very strong foothold in conservation here in Nigeria too.
Mhm. Do you think that that disconnect between the environment and conservationism and the people has to do with socioeconomic issues? You know, because you hear about poaching being an issue among those who are impoverished. Africa is obviously home to some of the most incredible wildlife in the world, yet there's that disconnect. So where do you think that comes from?
So there's what I've seen so far. There's quite a lot I can actually place on this. The socioeconomic issues are there, no doubt about that. But it's not enough. I wouldn't say someone is poaching, for example, just to feed his family. He's poaching, and for example, if I'm going to poach to feed my family, I'll kill a deer, or I'll kill maybe an antelope so that my family can have something to eat, maybe for a week. But when we are talking about a case where you are going to clear a whole forest, for example, because you want to export the logs so that you can have a lot of money just at once, you understand? It's now way past the idea of socioeconomics, basically. And I mean, if we had that culture or system where, so there's a lot of greed here, I see. There's a lot of corruption basically at work. There's a lot of ignorance, the culture, tradition that basically, that of things, well, I say, like, due to lack of education. So people feel that, oh, a certain animal will bring you some special luck or certain powers or certain form of, so you go killing all the vultures basically in the area just because you want to be rich, or you want to be, and see, everything always points not just to food, everything points to some selfish gain, one thing or the other. I'm going to kill all the gorillas because the heads of the gorillas will bring me money. The heads of the chimpanzees is going to fetch me a lot of money. So it's then when you even get to the markets where these animals are even being sold, it's not for the poor. The poor people can't even afford it because it's not cheap. It's not cheap. It's not being killed for them. It's killed. Then you have those people on the higher end, the affluent people supporting buying these things because they can afford it. So you see that now it's all a game of get rich quick, greed, and I always still stand on the greed. And where corruption comes in is where the government basically turns a blind eye purposely to some of these things because there is a cut in it for them. You have pangolin scales going through the Nigerian seaport, and you now have, okay, it's been found, it's been seized, but nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to burn it or destroy the commodity. So they do what? They sell it back to those people, getting a lot of money. I mean, what are we talking about here? These things just keep going on and on and on, and we're trying our best to see how we can raise as much as awareness as we can to help reduce this thing. But we are faced with a lot here in Nigeria.
So, Chinedu, how did you get into all of this? I mean, were you always an animal lover and passionate about the environment, and it just happened? But because obviously you're not born knowing all of this information about how things work in your country.
Yeah. Okay. So growing up, yes, I've always been an animal lover. I mean, even when I didn't see the animals, and luckily it was a time where all the gadgets were not available at that time. I'm sure I would have taken that distractions away. So I had to spend time a lot outdoors. It could be just looking out for the ants walking around, putting them in jars. So I had that experience, and just being, so I had to I always told my parents I would always want to live around birds. So I had a lot of birds always around. I mean, and when I talk about birds, I'm talking about like maybe like the chickens, the pigeons, the turkeys, the domestic ones. Basically, I had them growing up to the point I even had to name every one of them. Each of them had its own name. So so by the time I got to university, and then after my university, I mean, when I had to come back to start into the working space, I mean, I still saw that vacuum was basically still there. The interest was there, the passion never died. I mean, I still kept it alive. I would want to watch things. I would watch things, basically not anything Nigerian, but I would always see the state at which the animals in Nigeria were basically being treated. There were these markets where so instead of zoos, basically in Nigeria, we had more of this wet market or traditional market where animals are put in cages, and I've seen zoos. I had the opportunity to see zoos in other countries, and I've seen how the animals basically are being treated. I mean, there was a very big difference, or a very big gap. So I'm looking at it. I said something has to be done. So when I started first with, I said, okay, you know what, I'm gonna work with a sanctuary. Let me open up a sanctuary and see how we can start getting some of these animals in these kind of conditions and giving them something better, a better place to live, better food, better quality of life, if I must say. And we did that. I mean, it started in 2012. So we're basically 10 years running right now. So, and over time, we've grown, and we learn, we get to see. I get to read a lot about anything wildlife. I'm reading about, especially that concerns Nigeria. I'm reading about it. We're seeing the flaws. We're seeing where the politicians are playing games with wildlife, and we basically see all this in. And this has basically been an accumulation of experiences, interactions, meeting with people who within the same space also. And definitely, I hope we hope to continue growing and learning more about it. So I actually wanted to study veterinary medicine, but the thing about Africa, or African parents were like, "Oh no, don't do that, don't do that. You're not going to get a job in this country with that. So why don't you go for the human medicine?" So I followed. I have to be an obedient child. I followed my parents' wishes.
That's a lot of parents, by the way.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. So I followed the path, and so I still stayed there. But it didn't take that away. It didn't take the need and the desire. And I'm definitely even looking forward to still going back to actually study a bit about veterinary medicine, because I think it's really definitely important, because as much help as I can give to wildlife, not just in the rescue and trying to cater to them, I definitely want to do much more in providing that much care and attention to these species. So, yeah.
It sounds like seeing these things and watching what's going on in places like these wet markets, that's kind of the catalyst. And I would surmise that your decision to work with kids is kind of a way to start from the ground up, start with the next generation and changing their mindsets. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So first I was working in the school, and before I even ventured, I started working in the school a few months before I actually ventured into the whole wildlife sanctuary space. Then, but what I actually noticed was that I remember how curious and enthusiastic I was about every for nature. And it was actually during the course of my learning and growing in the educational sphere that I came across the different spheres of intelligence for kids. So you could see those who were children who are just naturally good at vocabulary. Some of them are good at kinesthetics with body movements. Some of them are very good with numerous numbers. And then there was a group which I think I happened to fall into, that are basically nature inclined. So you see these kids just wanting to be outdoors, connect. They love animals. Where nobody basically, they want to watch what's. And I see a lot of kids right now that are in that space. And there is, and I have to tell you, there is nowhere right now they can actually. That's so. For that thing, it needs to grow. That is, I call that natural intelligence, something that it basically needs to grow and flourish. So I felt I had to create that. I looked at myself. If every kid who had this natural intelligence or nature intelligence ability was allowed to flourish and express that thing, in the next 5-10 years, you would be having kids that people within the country that would want to do everything for wildlife. I mean, they would want to protect, they would want to, like, you think about, I think about lawyers, I think about doctors. You have doctors who are innovative, you want to go, you have lawyers who are breaking grounds in every sphere and every area, becoming activists even in those areas. And I mean, why won't we have people within the country also who will be advocates for wildlife? Look at all the people who are doing great things. Look at Jane Goodall. I mean, look at David Attenborough. These are people who just grew and blossomed in there. And there are many others like that grew and blossomed in those areas. But in Nigeria, it's quite difficult because there is no avenue for that. So we are being stifled with social media. The social media space is stifling the creativity of these kids. There are basically no more outdoors anymore where people can actually go and actually get connect with nature. I've stayed in the UK for a few years. I've seen what it's like. I mean, you go to the park, there are deers all over. You see the squirrels, you see the birds and the lakes, you see the birds. Everything speaks to a whole individual. But we lack in Nigeria here, it's not there. And I can be it's actually not there. So we decided to create that. We decided to bring that kind of setting where these kids, and I had to connect it with the kids, and now we had to groom them, teach them what is it like to have these things around, to be around these things. What does it mean to interact with these species and feel and see what the animals see. And we are seeing a shift. Now I see adults, even adults now are saying, oh, I remember this. I remember when I was growing up, I wish I had this, things like that. So so seeing those things, I know that definitely the future is going to be better. And that's the idea, leaving the future better than we basically met our present, basically. So we know the future will be better. So we plan on making it actually much better. So that's why we have to keep on doing basically what we do. And that's how the kids basically come into place.
Is there anything specific that you're working on right now that you want to talk about?
Okay, so we do, yes. So right now apart from the sanctuary that we run, we are doing quite a lot of activities now to promote. So we decided to take it a step further. So what we've started doing right now is that we tried now looking at how we can incorporate certain things that are common to Nigerians and bringing wildlife into it. So for example, one of the most common things in Nigeria that I see everybody can gather together to discuss about is sports. So we decided to see how we can tie in sports and the love for wildlife together. So now we are bringing people who may not necessarily be wildlife enthusiasts, but because they love sports, they come into contact with wildlife and information on wildlife. So we have been able to merge these things together to create programs such as we call it we call it Hoops for Wildlife. So this is where girls get to play basketball to raise awareness about for wildlife species that are declining in Nigeria. Then we have Play for Pangolin, which is a soccer competition that we get kids to come from different areas, from different schools to play football to raise awareness for pangolins also. here in Nigeria. So these are the kind of, and we're seeing a lot of kids now becoming very enthusiastic about it, or you ask them, oh, what are you playing? Why are you doing this? Oh, so it's to raise awareness for the pangolin. And this is an animal that was almost obscure. I mean, a lot of people didn't know about these animals that it existed. But because of these kind of activities, we are seeing a keen interest now in young people wanting to do certain things. And we know that as we sow these seeds presently, we know that it's definitely going to make a great change for the future. So that's really what we do.
Looking over some of the work that you've already done, what would you say some of your greatest successes have been within the organization?
Okay, so we've been able to, apart from, okay, so within the wildlife space, we've also been able to coach and work with kids, young people on environmental factors. So I'm looking at the environment and how the environment also affects wildlife. So we had a campaign recently where we were highlighting issues like plastic pollution affecting sea creatures, turtles. And we get to see a lot of turtles in Nigeria. And the thing about turtles is that they once the turtles beach on the Nigerian shores, they are basically captured and killed for food. So we did some form of kind of like an awareness. So what we did is that the kids went out to the beach to clean up the beach, taking out all the plastic from there. We used the plastic to create some kind of fashionable outfits, clothing. We took the clothing to so it's called trashing. We took the clothing to like a shopping mall. So the kids were like having like a run. They had a runway there. They did a kind of like a fashion show. And it was picked up by Reuters. Reuters is an international organization, media company, and it actually went viral. And the students really were very happy to see that their advocacy in raising awareness against plastic pollution that affects wildlife actually went viral. And we were very, very, very happy with that. So that's one of the things when with the kids basically involved. Then the other things, especially our work with the pangolins right now, it's been really groundbreaking for us, where we've been able to cater to rescue these pangolins from wet markets, groom them all through life, a short period of their lives, then release them back into some protected spaces where we believe, which basically normally is actually not being done. I have a friend who is also doing that here in Nigeria, but basically it's not a common thing which we basically get to see, and I'm really proud of that. But the thing there about it, I'm also very, very proud of, is that for the past 10 years, we've basically done this by ourselves. It's basically a self-funded work. We've not really had any form of major NGO or government organization coming in to help us in this space. So it's basically, because I work, most of the funds basically we generate goes to catering for. Right now we have about 150 plus animals within our care. And it's been 10 years of this dedicated work. This November we'll be celebrating that kind of a program that highlights basically that 10 years of work. And we are really looking forward to it, and we're hoping for better for the future.
Yeah, that's really exciting. So what do you have planned for the future then?
So for the future, we have, in fact, so that's the thing we're really looking out for now. We want to create, so where we are currently, especially where our sanctuary is located. So we do have kids that come into the sanctuary and basically learn about the animals. Adults also do the same thing, come and learn about the animals. But the problem we're facing right now is that our sanctuary is actually already maxed out. So we basically reached the full capacity that we have. So the future basically for us is to now own forest spaces. Like we want to get some forests, some forests that haven't yet been completely destroyed, so that we can protect these forests and have some of these animals reintroduced back into those kind of spaces. Now that will also create an avenue for tourism, education, research for students that don't have any place to do their research, especially in the university. And it will really turn things around for wildlife here in Nigeria. And that's what we're really looking and hoping for, that we basically get to. And that's what we are really expecting to do.
Let me ask you, what do you believe is the greatest challenge facing wildlife in Nigeria right now?
So as far as I'm concerned, the greatest threat to wildlife is the government. Sadly, it is the government right now, because there is actually no effort from their part, zero, and I say zero effort from their part in anything. Because, for example, there has been, I know we've done quite a lot. We've brought a lot of, I wouldn't want to say bad press, but we've really tried to bring in a lot of light to the issues that are happening here, so that the government will basically hear, but nothing has been done about it. During the COVID-19, the wet markets were thriving. The wet markets were really thriving during the when most countries were in lockdown. The wet markets in Nigeria, especially here in Lagos, they were thriving, still selling the animals that were even believed to cause or originate the COVID pandemic, which was basically the pangolins. So we brought that out into the media space, and a lot of people, we felt the government would move to do something to shut down those markets. Nothing was done. Our forests are being dissipated every day. There's been reports back and forth concerning the loss of forests and biodiversity. We brought it to the government, but yeah, the government knows about these things, but because somebody's getting a cut or somebody's getting something, nothing is basically being done. We have animals in Nigeria that are only found in Nigeria and no other parts of the world, but there are no programs currently that are running to protect these species. Now, these species are already thinning down to their population, are thinning down to almost zero, but still, there is no government intervention. So there is quite a lot the government can do. There are the laws. On the streets, people sell animals as big as turtles, sell animals like lions on the internet. Yeah, there's a lot happening with with no restriction whatsoever. And we cannot do this by ourselves. It's not something we, as an NGO, a little NGO in our little corner, can actually achieve. It needs the big guns from the government, to somebody to step up and say, this has to stop. And that's only then we're going to have a turnaround when it comes to issues regarding wildlife here in Nigeria.
What else haven't I asked you that you think is important for me to include?
We basically covered, except you want to talk about the issues of wet market, but I've still mentioned issues like the governments are aware of everything basically that has to do with wildlife here in Nigeria. The problem is just that nothing is basically being done. Nigerians are enthusiastic about wildlife. A lot of people are looking for I would like to take my child to see this animal. I would like to take my child to see this. But so a lot of people are interested about this, but little is actually being done. And if Nigeria decides to wake up, we can pull in much, just like South Africa, just like Kenya. They have these animals within their tourist spaces. But I know there are other issues Nigeria faces. Don't get me wrong, there are security issues right now that are basically being security threats almost everywhere in Nigeria, which also needs to be curbed for anything like tourism or anything basically to thrive. But we cannot just cave in and kill ourselves because of that. Somebody really has to hold the ground or the fort in certain areas, and that's where we work, especially within the wildlife space. And we have to just definitely do what we can.
We'll definitely have to check back up with you and see how your campaigns are going and what it's looking like over there. Because I think, making headway, like you said, is really paramount.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Chinedu, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate that too. Thank you very much.